Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Sheldon-Feld with the International Grief Institute and Grief Diaries, and this is Moments of Hope, a show featuring people who turn pain into purpose to do good things in the world, and also who aren't afraid to have a conversation about the conversation we're not having in America. Tonight, we are talking about cultural reactions to death, grief, and loss. And we're embarking on a cultural examination of how people around the world view grief. And really, it's to share our commonalities and find that common ground between us that unites us all, because grief is something experienced by everyone around the world, and it transcends all differences. And tonight, our expert guest is Uma Girish. Welcome to the show, Uma.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. So, Uma, you are co-founder of the International Grief Council. You are an award-winning author, and you are, let's see, you've got a kind of a long list here of accolades. So you have an international diploma in teaching and training from Cambridge in the UK. You're a certified dream coach, and you are also host of Grammar of Grief. And you are going to talk tonight about how people in India face grief and loss and death. And you have your own story to share. But before we get there, tell us about grief in India. What happens when someone dies? What's the funeral look like?
So typically when someone dies in India, and I'm talking about the Hindu context, which may be a little different from what happens with the Muslims. So just to give you the context, that this is what happens in a Hindu household. Even if the person dies in a hospital or in a road accident, the body is brought to the home. So we don't have funeral homes. We don't have that concept in India for Hindu people. The body is brought to the home where the last rites are administered. Now, if it's not convenient for the body to come home because it's on the third floor and there is no elevator in the building, then it goes straight to the crematorium. And there's a space in the crematorium where the body can be laid down and last rites can be administered and performed. So the priest is there, family members are there, and that's how it's done.
And who administers the last rites?
The last rites are typically administered by the son. The son and daughter-in-law are really, how do I say this? They sort of hold center stage when it comes to last rites. But all the adult children are present, and the daughters typically bathe the body of the mother. If it's the mother who's passed away, the daughters do the rituals of bathing and purification and wrapping her body in a silk sari and placing a garland, rubbing sandal paste on her cheeks, that kind of thing. That's done by the daughters. And there's also a priest in attendance who is actually instructing you about what to do first and what to do next, because these are not things we know how to perform. And so he sort of guides you along the journey of the last rites.
And the garland, what's the garland made of?
It's a rose garland. Yeah, it's strung together with rose petals.
And so are the rose petals plucked from your garden, or does the priest bring them?
These rose garlands are available for sale in the flower market. So they're part of the last rites and the final rituals. There's a list that we draw up, and the priest will sometimes bring it, but usually the family members will go to the market and bring what is required ahead of the priest's arrival. So we are well prepared.
And so what happens if, let's say, my loss is losing a child in a car accident? What happens if you're not expecting the loss? Do they bring the body, and that's your first, awareness that there's been a loss, or does someone come and knock on your door and say, your child has died and we're bringing the body here?
Well, if a child dies in a road accident, then obviously if there's any chance of saving that child, he or she would be rushed to the nearest hospital. and
Right.
somebody would call the parents or the family members, the near and dear, basically.
Oh,
And then if that child is pronounced dead, then they bring the body home again, where last rites are administered.
okay. To the
Yeah.
parents' home.
To the parents' home, yes.
Okay. And then what happens after the last rites are given? How long is the body kept in the home?
The body is not kept in the home beyond 24 hours if we can help it. In my mother's case, for instance, both my brother and I, we live in the States. And so it took time for us to get on a flight and reach India. And my brother had to perform the last rites. So they actually sent her body for embalming. And the body was then brought from this place where the embalming happened. It arrived in a van to my parents' home. And then when we arrived, we had to take what's called the sacred bath, because we were going to be doing something which is considered a sacred act of, saying goodbye to your loved one. And so once we were ready, then the last rites began. And it took about, I think, 90 minutes for the last rites to be completed. And then she was on her journey to the crematorium. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And are they, so they're cremated. Are they always cremated?
Yes. We don't bury bodies in the Hindu culture. They're always cremated. Yeah.
Okay. And then what do you do with the ashes?
So usually women are not supposed to go to the crematorium. It's only the men folk who will accompany the body. My uncle, my mother's brother, and my brother were the two people who accompanied her body to the crematorium. But in the case of my father, I think my sisters and I made a bit of a fuss, and we said, this is, he died in 2010. So we said, this is 2010. We are not going to be archaic and not let women go with him. And we insisted on going to the crematorium. So we wait there while the body takes a while to burn, This was
no, I didn't know.
I didn't know this. It took a long time. So we waited there. First, we performed the last rites, and then the body was slid into the crematorium. And then we had to wait for his bones and ashes, because it doesn't all break down, which we collected in a jar, which my brother then went with the priest and some male members of the family to the ocean where the ashes were immersed.
Okay. Is that common, disposing of the ashes in water? Is that the most common?
Yes.
Okay.
That's commonly done. In fact, we don't bring the ashes home and preserve them like you do in this part of the world. The ashes are almost immediately, immersed in the ocean. Yeah.
Okay. Is it always the ocean or any body of water?
Typically the ocean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what do you wear during the okay, so the body is cremated and you've got the ashes. Do you have a service, a funeral?
No, there is no funeral service.
Okay, so you don't have.
No, there is no funeral service, but we have 13 days of rituals.
Okay.
Yes.
And so is it a different ritual every day?
Every day, yes, we go to the temple. The priest shows up at the temple, and every day there's a different kind of ritual that's performed. Now, I'm not qualified to speak about the significance of each ritual and how it is performed. We just follow the directions that the priest is guiding us through, and we do what is required of us. But there are rituals where we feed the crows. The crows are considered to be representative of ancestral energies. So the belief is that the soul has departed the body and the soul is on its way to join the ancestors. So we feed the crows. There are different dishes that are made every single day. There are pujas or ceremonies that we perform. We don't cook food in the home, so typically family members bring food. We are not supposed to light the stove for 3 days when there's a death in the family. I think it started because, that was considered to be a time for mourning, so you didn't have to worry about preparing meals and eating and stuff like that. So family
Okay.
members and friends will typically bring meals to the home. And the focus is really on getting through the rituals. So the rituals provide such a wonderful framework for the grieving experience, because family members get together, we perform these rituals together. There's a lot of crying that happens. We share stories, we share memories, and then on the 13th day, which is the last day of the rituals, there's a big feast to which all family members and friends, close friends, are invited. And the priest will it takes almost half a day for that ceremony to be performed. The priest does a lot of chanting, and he explains what's going on with the soul of this person who just passed away. And he also takes the time to speak about the virtues of this person, the life they lived, the people they touched, their achievements and accomplishments. So I think that's the closest parallel to what you have here, which is like a eulogy or a funeral service. And that happens on the 13th day. And then for a whole year after that, we have rituals every month. Every month.
Really?
Yeah.
And is that for anyone, any loved one who's passed, such as your mother, your father, a child, a sibling?
Yes. Anybody who passed away, because it's considered, the first year is considered to be the period of mourning. It's the official period of mourning, which culminates in the first anniversary. So on the first anniversary is the biggest ceremony or the ritual that we perform. And then after that, you're supposed to, rejoin or re-engage with normal life. So the first 12 months up, when someone passes away, every month there is an observance, there is a ritual, there's a prayer, there's a ceremony. We don't celebrate any festivals for a whole year. No weddings are performed in the family for that 1 year. It is officially the period when you're mourning that person's passing. Yeah.
But it applies to everyone, not just the immediate circle.
Exactly. The observance is for the intimate family circle. So when my mother died, it was all of us, the siblings and our family. So we didn't really perform. We didn't celebrate anything for a whole year. We didn't talk about weddings. We didn't attend weddings. So it's just understood that that's a period when you are actively mourning the passing away of this person. Now, it didn't apply so much to, let's say her cousins and their families. This was just the immediate family. So it depends on how close you are with the person who passed away.
Okay, so first degree relatives.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a name for that year? When they say, well, she can't go to this wedding because she's in mourning, is there a term that you say instead of mourning?
We say that you can't do anything until the shraddham is performed. The shraddham is the first anniversary of the person's dying. So that is supposed to be a significant milestone, because once that's done, then you re-engage with normal living.
And do you wear anything specific for that first year, or are you expected to refrain from wearing something specific, such as a certain color?
Not really. We don't have this thing that we have to wear black or white. But during the performance of the rituals, soon after my mother died, for instance, or soon after someone passes away, the women will typically wear a sari, which is a traditional garment, and the men wear what is called a dhoti, which is made of cotton and wrapped around their waist, and they're typically bare-bodied. The upper torso, they don't wear anything, but they wear a sort of a cotton linen that's wrapped around the waist, and that's traditional garb for performance of anything that's considered sacred or auspicious. Yeah.
Okay. So are you allowed throughout the year then to wear bright colors, cheery, flowery things, or you're not expected to refrain from?
Yeah, India is a land of bright colors, if you know, and we typically, don't refrain from wearing colors. That being said, we are a little more modest and humble and sensitive about what kind of jewelry we're wearing. We make sure that we are not overly adorned. There is that symbolic 1 year that we have an eye on. So we do toe the line. We do pull it back when it comes to, dressing up and so on. But we don't really. That doesn't really apply to the colors. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so when you're within that first year, and let's say you go into the grocery store and you're triggered by your mom's favorite food, and suddenly you have, strong emotions welling up inside you. Is it acceptable to cry in public?
Grief is a community experience in India because in India is a very family-centric, community-centric culture. So if you go into a grocery store and you're reminded of the person who passed away and you have a bit of a meltdown, it's perfectly all right. Someone will come running up to you, hold you, ask you what happened, be interested in the story of, how your mother cooked that particular dish, what it meant to you. In fact,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, it's completely acceptable to cry in public and to wear your emotions on your sleeve. There's nothing wrong about that. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
We are a very emotional people, actually.
And so what do you believe happens to the soul when it dies, or when the body dies?
We believe that the soul returns to where it came from, that it rejoins the light that it was birthed from, that it came into a human body for a particular reason, because the Hindus believe in reincarnation. So you came here to experience certain lessons, to evolve to the next level. And when your job is done, you go back to the light where you came from. You rejoin your ancestors. So that really is the belief. Yeah.
Okay. And so is that something that provides comfort, knowing that the soul came and did what it had planned to do, and that do you believe you'll be reunited again?
I absolutely believe that I will be reunited with everyone who went before me. And I think knowing that you come here for a particular reason, that this is not some random trip that you make here and you have all these struggles and pain and challenges, is very comforting. You know that you came here for the express purpose of your own evolution, and that you came here to create love and to experience love. You came here to love and be loved. So when we are able to live life with that kind of a focus, I think we live better lives, and we're more aligned with our soul's values instead of what culture tells us. You should go after success and be ambitious and have more than somebody else. When we know that our soul came here to evolve, and the only way it can evolve is by learning to love better, by learning to be a space for compassion and kindness and oneness, then I think it makes this life worth living, even if we have to go through some painful times.
Right. Beautifully said. And so in 2008, when you and your husband and your daughter came to America, you relocated to Chicago, and 10 days later, you got some devastating news about your mom. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
And she lived for 8 more months, and then she passed at 68 years old.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And so you went back there to India. How long were you there?
I went back to India as soon as we got the news that she was diagnosed, and I was there for a month and a half with her.
And did you take your daughter with you?
No, my daughter was getting ready to go to summer school here because she needed some extra credits before she could start high school. She was going as a sophomore in high school, not even a freshman. and so needed some extra credits because the educational system in India is a little bit different from how the school system works here. So she couldn't really go with me. So I had to travel back for myself.
Yeah. Oh, that must have just been really, really hard for you, especially because you were new to Chicago.
It was
Yeah.
heartbreaking. I remember telling my husband, I feel like I'm being torn in half because I want to be here for her. She's going to be stepping into an American school for the first time, and I'm not going to be here. At the same time, I don't know if I should say no to going back and being with my mother, because my mother was caring for my father, who was already very ill by that time. And so her diagnosis really threw a spanner in the works. Both my parents were living with my sister at the time, and my sister had a full-time job. She had travel. I knew they needed help. So it wasn't a choice for me not to go. And my husband said to me, he said, if you decide not to go, you don't want to end up regretting it for any reason. So just go and do what you have to do. And he said, Ruki's our daughter. Ruki's going to be okay. We are here to take care of her. And things worked out okay. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. You have a very wise husband.
I do, yes.
And so you went back there for 6 weeks and then you came back. Were you here in America when your mom passed?
I was, yes, still in that same Chicago apartment that we were living in at the time. I never believed she would die. I believed she would be part of the survivor statistic. So I was devastated when she died because I had been praying so hard. Back then I thought, you made deals with God, that you got what you wanted if you prayed hard enough. And so when I didn't get the outcome I wanted, I was heartbroken, completely devastated.
I'm so sorry. Did you feel like God let you down, or that you did somehow you take on any guilt for thinking you just didn't pray hard enough or long enough or in the right way?
No, I didn't go to guilt at all. I went to anger at God. I said, I did everything I could do in my power to help her, to be there for her, to pray to you. My mother wanted to visit a lot of temples when she was ill because she was a woman of strong faith and she believed that her faith would pull her through. So we took her to all the temples she wanted to go to. And, so I said to God, I did everything right and you didn't give me what I wanted. So I was really mad.
How long were you mad at God?
Probably a good couple of months. And, things started happening that made me believe that God didn't have anything to do with this. This was, my own misperception. Yeah.
And so you went back there. Did your whole family go back to India for your mom's funeral?
No, my husband was actually getting ready to travel to India on business. So his tickets were already booked. So he said, I'm just going to stick with my travel plan. You guys go ahead of time. You guys meaning me and my brother's family. So my brother, sister-in-law, my nephew, who was a baby, a toddler, and we left immediately the same day that we got the news. And my husband and daughter flew, I think 3 days later. Yeah.
Okay. And so how long were you there at that time before coming back to the States?
I was there for 2 weeks. Yeah, I spent 2 weeks there.
And so when you came back here, where grief is a little different, here we have, many people think within a couple months, you should be over it, should have processed it, and, life returns to normal. In India, you are given that year. People hold that sacred space for a whole year for you to not only mourn the loss of your loved one, but to transition into life without them, with them in your heart. And so what was that like for you coming back to America and mourning the death of your mom in America? Was that hard?
It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Not that I knew how grief and loss worked in America at the time, because I didn't even know the culture. I was so new.
Right.
But nobody knew my mother. You know how so many of my clients talk about how their loved ones become invisible when they're gone. Well, my mother was invisible because nobody even knew her. So how could they even talk about her, right? So I heard everyone say, I'm so sorry for your loss, which seemed like more of a cliche than anything to me
Mm.
because nobody had any context for who she was, the qualities that she stood for, her values, her loveliness. Nobody knew her. So that was extremely challenging. Number two, it was winter time in Chicago. It was my first
Mm.
winter. The first winter I was seeing snow. I hadn't seen snow before that. So talk about, having to navigate winter. I was a brand new driver. I didn't drive in India. So I learned how to drive in my
My
40s.
goodness.
Yes. So learning how to drive, my stomach would clench when I got in the car and sat behind the wheel because the roads were icy and I was just hoping I wouldn't crash. I was just petrified of driving. So that was the next thing. And then of course being away from family and friends, because it's family and friends that provide this tight network of support when you're grieving a loss. I didn't have anybody here. At the time, my brother and I were just about beginning to heal a very contentious relationship. We had not been talking to each other for several years before my mother passed. In fact, it was her diagnosis that even brought us face to face. I didn't even know he was living in Chicago when we moved here, or right before, let me say right before we moved here, because I just said to my mother, where does he live these days? Because he had a job that took him all over the world. He was in Germany and the UK and various places. And she said, he is now in Chicago because he stayed in touch with her.
Right.
And my jaw dropped. I said, of all the places that he could be in and of all the places that we could have gone to, and here I am, set to go to Chicago, and that's where he is. Well, God had a plan, right? The universe had a plan, because when she was diagnosed, that's when we started communicating with each other after that really long break. So,
and did it continue on that upward trajectory of healing your relationship after your mom passed?
I would say it was a bit awkward in the beginning because there was so much that was unsaid. There was so much that couldn't be said. The timing was all wrong. When it really started to heal was after my father died. My father died 18 months after my mother. I think he just felt very broken, didn't know how to express his grief. He had dementia by then. She was his anchor and his rock. And when she died, I think he just gave up on life. So when that happened, I gathered my siblings together. So we have 4 siblings. And I said to them, the 4 of us are going to go out to a restaurant and eat dinner. Well, this is frowned upon in the Hindu culture because you don't really, when there's a death in the family, you don't really go and eat out. So I said, we're not telling anybody, just the 4 of us, we are going. And we told our spouses, nobody's invited, it's just the 4 of us. And that was my decision. And I said, the purpose of this dinner outside is healing. We have all been at each other's throats. Well, typically my 2 sisters and I were ranged against my brother. So I said, we've all, said things and done things we're not proud of. We are going to heal the relationships once and for all. Both our parents are gone. We only have each other now. So we held hands around the table. We each said our forgiveness piece. And then my father, because he was in AA many years prior to his passing, he went to AA because he struggled with alcoholism. The serenity prayer had been a part of our family life. So the 4 of us held hands and we said the serenity prayer, and we made a promise to each other that we would look out for each other. And our relationships are just beautiful today. We are in each other's lives, my brother and I. We eat dinner together all the time. We are over at their place. They come over, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful relationship.
That's a beautiful collateral blessing that came about, resulting from your mom's passing.
Right.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. So how has your mom's loss, how has her passing affected your life? Because you've gone on to do some very cool things, which we'll get to here in a minute. But what was that like for you? What transformation took place within you?
When she died, it felt like I died with her. So, she was my first home. She gave me life. She gave birth to me. So when she died, I felt like the ground just opened up beneath my feet. I didn't know who I was. There was a real crisis of identity there for a while. And then I also began to have this unshakable conviction that she and I had made some kind of a soul contract, that she would die in exactly the way she did after sending me off to the United States, because I was meant to do something with that loss. So as I started moving on my journey, because I wanted to find out, what is this thing called death? Where do we go when we die? What happens to the soul? Why do we come here? All of this was brand new territory for me, even though I grew up in India and I would hear adults talking about reincarnation and soul journeys all the time. I didn't have time for that. I was busy and was never really interested. But now I was beginning to ask the questions. The timing was perfect. And I felt that my mother's passing transformed me in every way. I mean, when I look at the Uma that I was prior to her passing, she was someone completely different from the Uma I am today. So that informs the way I live, that informs the work I do, how I serve the world, how I show up every day, my relationship with the divine. Everything has changed.
That's another collateral blessing that comes about from loss, is that oftentimes it transforms us into a better version of ourselves. And I like to think that Linda 2.0, after losing my daughter, is a much better version of Linda 1.0. And I think that if you can open your heart to that, I think that is pretty transformative itself, in understanding that you are no longer the same person, but you're a better version.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So you, from that time, losing your mom and going through this journey of asking, what does death mean? What does this journey through grief, and the earth opened up and swallowed me whole. What does this mean for me? And now take us to today. You are doing some really cool things. First off, you're co-founder of the International Grief Council, and you and your collaborators have done some retreats. You did a retreat last year in England?
Yes, yeah, in Oxford.
And you're doing it. Yeah, and it just sounds wonderful. So you're doing some really wonderful things. You've also written 2 books.
Yeah.
And are you writing more?
It's been a journey that I couldn't have imagined possible, because when I came here to the States, I came here with the intention of teaching English as a second language. I was a trainer with the British Council in India, and I worked with corporate employees, teaching them business English skills. And I knew business English wouldn't cut it in the United States. So I said to myself, okay, I think ESL is the next best thing I can do. Little did I know that the universe was getting ready to move me in a completely different direction. So when my mother died and my world fell apart, I knew that I didn't have all the time in the world. I had to wake up and ask myself, how do I want to live now? I mean, life is so precious. We don't know how much time we have. So I wanted to get really clear about, what are my soul values? How do I want to make a difference? What is the heart imprint that I'm going to leave on the world that will live on after I'm gone? How can I create more love and peace? So I felt guided to, first of all, learn about grief and loss and death and dying, and the soul journey and past lives and reincarnation. I sort of, worked with mentors and guides and got my certifications and so on. And I felt called to work with the grieving. So the piece that most speaks to me, that I find most compelling to guide my clients on, is the piece of transformation. The women that are ideal clients for me are the ones who know that there's something deeper for them to do. Their loss has inspired them to search for meaning in their lives, but they don't know what that is. They don't know how to find it. They don't know how to go about it. And that is where I sort of step into their lives, hold their hands, and walk with them as they guide on the journey. I help them heal and transform so that they can then find this deeper purpose and move on, move through their lives with more joy and hope and meaning. And then thank you. Quite synchronistically, this would be too long a story to share here, but I've shared it in some other interviews. My mother literally brought me a contract from Hay House for my memoir, the book that I wrote about her passing and my transformation. So that book is called Losing Amma, Finding Home. And that was published by Hay House. And I have a brand new book now, which is about a month old. It's not even up on Amazon USA just yet. It's up on Amazon India, also published by Hay House. And that's called Lessons from Grace, What a Baby Taught Me About Living and Loving.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. And so you call your mom Amma? Is that her name, or is that what you call a mother?
Yeah, that's the term for mother in in my native language.
Okay. And so in looking back on the past 11 years, what's your reaction to all the stuff that you've done?
You know, when I look back on my life, even in the last 11 years, I feel like I have achieved so much more in these 11 years compared to the 40 some years that came before, because these 11 years have been infused with the richness of meaning and purpose. I feel like everything I have done, it's not about success, it's not about ambition. I redefine success and ambition today to mean something that it didn't mean, prior to my mother's passing. But when I look back at the difference I've made in the world, at the number of lives I've been able to touch, at how much I've been teaching and sharing in my private coaching sessions, in my group coaching programs, in the retreats that I do with the International Grief Council, in interviews such as this one and many others, I feel that this is the message I was born to share. This is what my soul came here to do. So there is an immense sense of satisfaction when I, cast a glance back over the last 11 years.
You live with intention now, whereas before, at least for me, prior to losing my daughter, I was more concerned about what I was going to make for dinner and getting this child to band practice and this to swimming, and this and that. And since having a profound loss, our vision of the world changes. It shifts, and little trivial stuff no longer worry us. It's like our hearts have been broken wide open to the world. And really, that's an incredible, humbling experience, really. And you think about, wanting to make the world a better place by living with attention and touching the hearts of those who need a light, who need a helping hand, because there's many. And when you do that, you leave the world a little better place than when you came in. That's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah, it really is, Linda. I know you get what I'm saying at a heart and soul level.
Very much.
People who are watching, who've experienced something terrible, and they know that they're here to transcend this loss, to transform their lives.
Well, I think many people here in America, we tend to be very afraid of death. So it's a conversation no one's having. And yet when it hits you, one of the main problems with that is that when you experience death, we're not equipped. We are ill-equipped. We don't know what to expect. We didn't know it would hurt this bad. We feel afraid. And people then, we start losing relationships and friendships because people don't know what to do with this. We have this conception in our minds in America that they'll be okay in a few months. And after 6 months, if you're still crying, they start to think, oh, something's wrong with her. And that they treat you as if you're stuck in your grief. And the truth is that we lost our daughter unexpectedly from a car accident. And I don't remember the first 2.5 years because of the shock. And only then did I begin to process the loss. And so, I think it's really important to help people understand that grief is something that affects everyone at some point in life. And of course, it's as unique as a fingerprint, right? Because we all have different filters, different childhood experiences and such. Yet at the same time, it transcends all differences. It really does. And if we can learn to be more open about it and talk about it, then I think that we can help future generations deal with it, be more supportive. And we can't fix grief. It's something that we each have to process in our own mind. And for some people, it's lifelong. I mean, you never stop losing or missing your mother, right?
That's right.
Always, and it's, at every dinner table for, here in America, Thanksgiving and Christmas and such, we want our loved ones at the dinner table. And so when those holidays come around, that empty chair is still there. And, so we're thinking about, merrier times in, past years and such. But the truth is that, with grief, the rawness does soften over time. And it's really important for people who are just beginning their journey to understand that one day it won't always feel this raw. And so, you and I are doing what we're doing because we don't want others to feel so alone like we did.
Right.
And we know that if we make a difference, then future generations will be better off when they face grief, right? Our children will have better support. It'll be more talked about. People will know more what to expect and the support resources that's out there. And I think that that's very, very important. So my final question to you, Uma, is what today, 11 years after losing your mom, what's your definition of hope?
My definition of hope is, I think of hope as the light within. So your light can be temporarily dimmed by the season you're going through. With some of us, it's loss. With some others, it's loss of a loved one. For some others, it may be a diagnosis, a bodily injury, a loss of self-identity. And hope is like this light that flickers within us. It doesn't remain at the same intensity or strength, but if you let it be snuffed out, then hope dies. But it's up to you to cup your hands around that flame and make sure it's protected. So make sure that no matter what season of life you are going through, as long as you cup your hands around that flame of hope and don't let it die, you can find your inner light again.
That's beautifully said. I love that. So you are on Facebook and you've got a group there on Facebook. Is that right?
Yes, my group is called Transform Pain into Purpose. It's a group for women, and we have women who are grieving all different kinds of losses. So I welcome anyone who is feeling grief around, an empty nest, a parent who's about to die, and they're experiencing some degree of anticipatory grief, loss of self-identity, a difficult diagnosis, the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship. There are women who are dealing with all kinds of losses in my group. So beautiful. I do teaching and training and all kinds of interesting stuff in my Facebook group. I also have a Facebook business page, and you can find me at Uma Rites, facebook.com/Uma Rites. And on my business page, I'm pretty active there as well. I do themed days. I've begun to do that. So it's Motivation Monday, Q&A Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday, and so on. I do a little teaching every single day on whatever I'm guided to, whatever spirit tells me to speak about. So those are some ways you can get in touch with me. And of course, my website is umagirish.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Uma, for viewers, the first 5 people that send her an email will receive a free 30-minute session with Uma. So that is super cool. Uma, what email can they reach you at?
They can write to me at uma@umagirish.com.
Okay, wonderful. So the first 5 people who do that get a free 30-minute session with Uma. How cool is that? So Uma, thank you so much for joining me and sharing what it's like facing death, grief, and loss in India, and then having the wisdom of returning home to America, your new home, and facing grief, death, and loss in America. So thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and helping teach our viewers about grief in the Hindu culture, and joining us here on the show. So viewers, I will be on the Journeys of Hope bereavement cruise for the next couple of weeks. And for those of you that did try to join us, it is sold out. But the good news is that the cruise will begin preparations for next year. And so those of you who want to join us next year, you can get in early. I believe you can sign up starting around April. And then you have the whole year to make payments, because it is aboard the Royal Caribbean, Oasis of the Sea, one of the largest cruise ships in the world. And it is a 7-night cruise. So a lot of fun. You will be among people who speak your lost language. There's over 20 presenters, so all kinds of activities, workshops, presentations, one-on-one time. And so it is sold out for this year, but you can join us for the next year. And information on that is on my website, lindafeld.com. And our next show then will be March 18th, where we are talking with Patty Farino about death rituals. So join us again, same time, same place, on March 18th. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye, Uma.
Bye, Linda. Thank you.